Jack Harper wiped the grease from his hands onto an already stained rag and looked out across the desolate landscape of New Haven. The colony was little more than a collection of patched-up buildings, rusted machinery, and piles of scrap metal, scattered as far as the eye could see. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home, or at least it had been for the last 10 years. Jack sighed deeply. He knew better than anyone that this place didn't have much going for it. Even the Galactic Federation, which had originally established the colony decades ago, had long since abandoned them. They called it unviable and left without so much as a goodbye. The people of New Haven were on their own now, surviving with whatever scraps they could scavenge or cobble together. Most days it felt like they were just one bad harvest or one broken generator away from total collapse. But despite all the hardship, there was still something about this place that kept Jack rooted here. Maybe it was the stubbornness he shared with the other colonists, the refusal to give up no matter how tough things got. Or maybe it was Clara Monroe, the brilliant engineer who always seemed to find solutions when everyone else saw only problems. Clara was in her workshop today, as usual. She had converted an old cargo container into a makeshift lab, filling it with tools, half-finished projects, and stacks of technical manuals. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her face was streaked with dirt and oil, but she didn't seem to care. Right now, she was hunched over a table examining a circuit board with intense focus. Jack walked over and leaned against the doorway, watching her work. "You know," he said casually, "if you keep staring at that thing any harder, it might burst into flames." Clara glanced up briefly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Then I'd finally have a reason to stop tinkering with it," she replied dryly before returning her attention to the circuit board. After a moment, though, she set it down and turned to face him fully. "What do you want, Jack? You're not here just to make jokes." Jack shrugged, stepping inside and closing the distance between them. "Actually, I came to talk about something. Serious, something big." His tone had shifted, becoming more earnest. Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Big, huh?" she said, crossing her arms. "This ought to be good." He hesitated for a second, choosing his words carefully. "You ever think about what we're really doing here? I mean, sure, we fix generators and patch up walls, but none of that changes the fact that we're sitting ducks. Every time some pirate ship swings by or those corporate raiders show up, we're lucky if we don't lose half our supplies, or worse." Clara nodded, slowly. She knew exactly what he meant. Just last month, a group of pirates had attacked the colony, stealing food, medicine, and anything else valuable they could carry. The colonists had managed to drive them off eventually, but not before suffering heavy losses. It was a constant threat, hanging over their heads like a storm cloud. "So what are you suggesting?" Clara asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "That we pack up and leave? Because even if we wanted to, we don't exactly have the resources for that." "No," Jack said firmly. "I'm saying we fight back, properly this time." He gestured around the workshop at the heaps of spare parts and discarded equipment. "We've got all this scrap lying around, right? Pieces of old ships, outdated tech, junk nobody else wants. What if we used it to build something new? Something powerful enough to protect us?" Clara stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of machinery in the background. Then she let out a short laugh. "You're serious, aren't you?" she said, shaking her head. "You actually think we can build—" "What, exactly? A warship?" "Out of this." She waved her hand dismissively at the clutter surrounding them. "Why not?" Jack shot back undeterred. "Think about it. We've got nothing to lose. If we don't try, we'll just keep getting pushed around until there's nothing left of us. But if we succeed—" He paused, letting the idea sink in. "If we succeed, we'll have a chance. Not just to survive, but to take control of our own destiny." Clara frowned, considering his words. On the surface, the plan sounded insane, practically suicidal. Building a warship required expertise, materials, and funding they simply didn't have. And yet, there was something compelling about it, something almost inspiring. Over the years, she'd grown tired of feeling powerless, of watching her friends and neighbors suffer while larger forces manipulated their lives. Perhaps Jack was onto something. Perhaps they could turn their disadvantages into strengths. "All right," she said finally, surprising even herself. "Let's say we go ahead with this crazy idea. Where do we even start?" Jack grinned, clearly, relieved that she hadn't outright rejected him. "First, we need help. Lots of it. This isn't something two people can do alone. We'll need engineers, mechanics, pilots, anyone willing to pitch in. Second, we'll need to organize the materials we have, sort through the scrap, figure out what's usable, and start designing." "And third?" Clara prompted, raising an eyebrow. "Third," Jack said, his grin widening, "we convince the rest of the colony to believe in us. Because if we're going to pull this off, we're going to need every single person pulling in the same direction." Over the next few weeks, Jack and Clara threw themselves into the task of rallying support. They held meetings in the colony's central square, standing on makeshift platforms and speaking passionately about their vision. At first, many of the colonists were skeptical. Some laughed outright, calling the idea ridiculous. Others argued that they should focus on survival, rather than risking everything on such a bold endeavor. But slowly, steadily, people began to listen. Ben Riley, a former pilot who had settled on New Haven after being discharged from the military, was one of the first to sign on. Though he was gruff and reserved, his experience with starships made him invaluable. Rachel Myers, a young woman with a knack for coding and robotics, joined soon after, eager to contribute her skills. Together, they formed the core team, working tirelessly to sort through the mountains of scrap and begin assembling the pieces of what would become their warship. It wasn't easy. Days stretched into nights as they labored in the shadow of an old asteroid mine, using its natural cover to hide their progress from prying eyes. Accidents were common: burns from faulty wiring, cuts from jagged metal, bruises from dropped tools, but no one complained. There was a sense of purpose in the air, a shared determination that kept them going even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. As the weeks turned into months, the project began to take shape. What started as a chaotic jumble of parts gradually transformed into the skeleton of a ship. Clara worked tirelessly on the design, sketching blueprints and running simulations to ensure everything fit together properly. Jack coordinated the efforts of the volunteers, assigning tasks and troubleshooting problems as they arose. Ben and Rachel focused on integrating the various systems, piecing together engines, weapons, and navigation controls from mismatched components. Through it all, the spirit of New Haven grew stronger. The colonists who had once doubted the feasibility of the project now took pride in their contribution. Families brought food and water to the workers, children played among the piles of scrap, and musicians performed impromptu concerts to boost morale. It was no longer just Jack and Clara's dream. It belonged to everyone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack stood beside Clara, looking up at the partially completed hull of the ship. Its surface was uneven, scarred with weld marks and patches of mismatched metal, but it radiated strength and resilience. "What do you think?" Jack asked quietly, breaking the silence. Clara smiled, her gaze fixed on the ship. "I think it's beautiful," she said softly. "Not because of how it looks, but because of what it represents. This is us, Jack, all of us. Our struggles, our hopes, our refusal to give up." Jack nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "Yeah," he agreed. "This is us." And for the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to believe, not just in the ship, but in the possibility of a brighter future. The days grew longer as the construction of the warship progressed. The colony's makeshift workshop buzzed with activity from dawn until well past dusk. Jack Harper moved between teams, his voice hoarse from shouting instructions and encouragement. Clara Monroe stayed close to the heart of the project, her hands covered in grease and her mind racing with calculations. Every decision mattered, every piece of scrap had potential, and every mistake could mean disaster. Ben Riley spent most of his time near the ship's skeletal frame, welding together sections of hull plating scavenged from old freighters. His face was hidden behind a mask, but his posture spoke volumes, focused, determined, and unyielding. Rachel Myers worked alongside him, programming rudimentary AI systems into the ship's control panel. Her fingers danced over the keyboard as she tested lines of code, ensuring that each function worked seamlessly. Despite their differences in age and experience, the two formed an unlikely partnership, bouncing ideas off each other and solving problems together. The ship began to take shape slowly but surely. Its design was unconventional, to say the least. The hull was a patchwork of mismatched metals, some gleaming silver, others dull and rusted. Engines salvaged from decommissioned vessels jutted out awkwardly at odd angles, held together by thick layers of reinforced steel. Weapon systems, cobbled together from outdated Federation tech and alien artifacts found floating in nearby debris fields, were mounted unevenly along the sides. To an outsider, it might have looked like a chaotic mess, but to those who built it was a masterpiece born of necessity. As the weeks passed, the colonists poured more of themselves into the project. Families brought meals to the workers, setting up tables under the shadow of the growing ship. Children played among the piles of scrap metal, pretending to pilot imaginary starships while their parents labored nearby. Musicians gathered in the evenings, playing songs on battered instruments to lift spirits and celebrate progress. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of exhaustion, excitement, and hope. Despite the unity, challenges were constant. Supplies ran low, forcing Clara and Jack to make difficult choices about which materials to prioritize. One day they discovered that a critical component needed for the reactor core was missing entirely. Without it, the ship wouldn't be able to sustain flight, let alone engage in combat. Frustration bubbled over during a heated meeting, with voices rising and tempers flaring. It was Rachel who finally broke the tension, suggesting they use an experimental alloy she'd been working on in secret. Though risky, the solution worked and the crisis was averted, but not without leaving everyone shaken. Jack often found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his tiny quarters. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on his shoulders. He knew that failure wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on the success of this project. Yet doubts crept in, whispering insidious thoughts. What if the ship fell apart during its first flight? What if the weapons malfunctioned or the engines failed? Worst of all, what if their efforts only brought more danger to New Haven? Clara noticed the toll the project was taking on him. One evening, as the rest of the team packed up for the day, she approached him where he stood leaning against the ship's unfinished hull. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said gently. "I haven't," Jack admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Too much to think about." Clara crossed her arms and studied him for a moment. "You're carrying this whole thing on your back, aren't you?" she asked. When he didn't respond, she sighed and stepped closer. "Listen to me, Jack. This isn't just your burden anymore. We're all in this together. If something goes wrong, we'll fix it, together. But right now you need to trust us. Trust yourself." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Jack nodded slowly, feeling a small measure of relief wash over him. "You're right," he said quietly. "I guess I've been so focused on making sure everything works perfectly that I forgot why we're doing this in the first place." "To protect our home," Clara reminded him, "and to remind the galaxy that we're still here, that we won't be pushed around anymore." With renewed determination, Jack threw himself back into the work. The final stages of construction required precision and patience, qualities that didn't come easily to someone as restless as he was. But Clara's steady presence kept him grounded, her calm demeanor balancing out his fiery intensity. Together they tackled the remaining tasks, pushing forward despite setbacks and fatigue. Finally, after months of relentless effort, the ship was ready. Standing before it on the launch pad carved into the asteroid mine, the entire colony gathered to witness the culmination of their hard work. The vessel loomed above them, its jagged silhouette cutting sharply against the darkening sky. Jack climbed onto a platform to address the crowd, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "This is it," he began, looking out at the sea of faces. "This is what we've built, with our own hands, with our own hearts, a symbol of who we are and what we can achieve when we refuse to give up." He paused, letting the significance of the moment sink in. "We started with nothing but scraps, things the rest of the galaxy thought were worthless. But we turned those scraps into something powerful, something unstoppable." Cheers erupted from the crowd, echoing through the valley. Clara joined. Jack on the platform, her expression solemn yet proud. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for New Haven," she said, her voice steady. "But remember this. The true strength of this ship lies not in its weapons or engines, but in the people who built it, in all of you." As the ceremony concluded, the crew prepared for the maiden voyage. Ben took his place in the cockpit, running final checks on the controls. Rachel monitored the ship's systems from the engineering bay, her eyes glued to the screens. Jack and Clara stood side by side on the bridge, watching as the countdown began. "Ready for this?" Jack asked, glancing at Clara. She smiled faintly, though there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." The engines roared to life, vibrating through the hull and sending shivers down everyone's spines. Slowly, majestically, the Iron Resolve lifted off the ground, its massive form ascending into the sky. For the first time in years, the people of New Haven watched something rise instead of fall. Their cheers followed the ship as it disappeared into the stars, carrying with it their hopes and dreams. Once in orbit, Ben guided the ship through a series of test maneuvers, pushing its limits to ensure everything functioned as intended. Our engines performed admirably, propelling the vessel faster than anyone had anticipated. The weapon systems fired accurately, obliterating targets set up in advance. Even the AI responded flawlessly, adjusting course and rerouting power with impressive speed. But the real test came sooner than expected. As the Iron Resolve drifted near the edge of New Haven's territory, sensors detected movement, a squadron of pirate ships closing in fast. At first, the crew assumed the pirates hadn't noticed them, but then one of the ships changed course, heading directly toward them. "They see us," Ben announced, his voice tense. "Looks like they're coming to investigate." Jack clenched, his fists, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Guess we're about to find out if this thing actually works," he muttered. Clara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "Stay calm," she urged. "We trained for this." The pirates surrounded the ship, clearly expecting an easy target. Their leader hailed them over the comms, sneering as he demanded surrender. Jack smirked, exchanging a glance with Clara, before responding. "Tell your friends goodbye," he said simply. With that, Ben activated the ship's weapons. Plasma cannons erupted with blinding light, tearing through the pirate fleet with devastating precision. Shields collapsed, hulls ruptured, and chaos reigned as the Iron Resolve maneuvered effortlessly through the fray. Within minutes, the enemy was in retreat, their once confident swagger replaced by panic. Back on New Haven, news of the victory spread quickly. The colony erupted in celebration, cheering the name of their newfound protector. Word traveled beyond their borders too, reaching neighboring systems and sparking whispers of rebellion. Pirates who once preyed on New Haven avoided the region entirely, terrified of the mysterious warship that had emerged seemingly out of nowhere. For the first time in years, the people of New Haven felt safe. But Jack knew better than to let his guard down. This was only the beginning. If word reached the Galactic Federation or worse, corporate powers, they wouldn't hesitate to crush New Haven and reclaim their scrap. Still, as he stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars, he allowed himself a rare moment of pride. They had done the impossible. They had taken nothing and made something extraordinary. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a colony, as a crew, and as survivors. The victory over the pirate squadron was a turning point for New Haven. For the first time in years, the colony felt a sense of security. The people walked with their heads held higher, and laughter echoed through the streets more often than not. But Jack Harper knew better than to let his guard down. He had seen enough battles to understand that one win didn't mean the war was over. If anything, It meant they were now on the radar of bigger, more dangerous enemies. Clara Monroe shared his concerns, though she tried to keep her worries hidden from the rest of the crew. She spent long hours in the engineering bay, running diagnostics on the Iron Resolve systems and making adjustments where needed. Despite its success in combat, the ship was still far from perfect. Every battle exposed new weaknesses, faulty wiring here, overheating reactors there, and Clara refused to let any issue go unaddressed. "We got lucky last time," she told Rachel Myers during one late-night session. "Next time, we might not be so fortunate." Rachel nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she updated the AI algorithms. "I'm working on improving the targeting system," she said without looking up. "It's good, but it could be faster. If we face someone with better tech, we'll need every advantage we can get." Meanwhile, Ben Riley focused on training the crew for future engagements. Though he had been a pilot once, years away from active duty had left him rusty. Still, he threw himself into the task, teaching others how to handle the ship's unconventional controls. His lessons were grueling, often leaving the trainees exhausted and frustrated, but no one complained. They all understood the stakes. The next fight could decide whether New Haven survived or fell. As weeks passed, life aboard the Iron Resolve settled into a rhythm. The crew rotated shifts, maintaining the ship and patrolling the edges of New Haven's territory. Tensions remained high, but morale stayed strong. Stories of their triumph against the pirates spread quickly, inspiring hope among the colonists below. Some even began referring to the ship as the Guardian Angel of New Haven, a title that made Jack chuckle despite himself. But trouble came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, as the ship orbited quietly above the colony, alarms blared, suddenly throughout the corridors. Clara sprinted to the bridge, her heart pounding. "What's going on?" she demanded, sliding into her seat beside Jack. "Unknown vessels approaching fast," Ben replied, his voice tight with tension. On the main screen, 3 sleek ships appeared, their designs unmistakably Federation issue. Unlike the ragtag pirate fleet they had faced before, these ships were state-of-the-art, bristling with advanced weaponry and shields. Jack clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just a patrol," he muttered. "They're here. For us?" Admiral Grant's face appeared on the comm screen moments later, his expression cold and commanding. "Attention, unidentified vessel," he began, his tone dripping with authority. "You are operating in restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded immediately." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Federation hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to take control and destroy anything that stood in their way. Clara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "He doesn't recognize the ship," she whispered to Jack. "Maybe we can bluff our way out of this." Jack hesitated, weighing the options. Fighting an entire Federation fleet was suicide, but surrendering wasn't an option either. "Let's play along for now," he decided. Turning to the comms, he addressed Admiral Grant directly. "This is Captain Harper of the Iron Resolve. We're conducting routine patrols to protect the colony. No hostile intent intended." Grant raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Routine patrols? With a ship like that?" His gaze shifted to the haphazard design of the Iron Resolve, lingering on the mismatched components. "You don't look like any patrol craft I've ever seen." "We make do with what we have," Jack shot back, keeping his tone casual. "New Haven doesn't exactly get priority funding from the Federation." Grant's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Indeed. Well, Captain Harper, consider this your formal warning. Cease operations immediately and return to your colony. Any further interference will be met with force." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the crew staring at each other in stunned silence. Clara exhaled sharply. "That went better than I expected," she admitted, though her tone was wary. "For now," Jack added grimly. "But if they figure out what we're really capable of," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Over the next few days, the Federation fleet maintained a cautious distance, observing the Iron Resolve from afar. The crew used the time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Clara worked tirelessly to reinforce the ship's defenses, installing additional shielding around critical systems. Rachel fine-tuned the AI, ensuring it could predict enemy movements and respond instantly. Ben drilled the crew relentlessly, simulating scenarios where they were outnumbered and outgunned. Despite their preparations, fear lingered in the background. Even Jack, who prided himself on staying calm under pressure, found it hard to shake the feeling of dread. He confided in Clara one night as they sat together in the mess hall, picking at lukewarm rations. "I keep thinking about what happens if we fail," he admitted, his voice low. "Not just to us, but to everyone back home. If the Federation decides to crush New Haven—" "They won't," Clara interrupted firmly. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. "Because we won't. Let them. Jack, we built this ship to protect our people, and that's exactly what we're going to do, no matter what." Her conviction steadied him, as it always did. "You're right," he said finally, managing a small smile. "Let's finish what we started." When the Federation fleet moved in for the attack, the crew was ready. Admiral Grant's ship surrounded the Iron Resolve, firing barrages of plasma bolts that lit up the darkness of space. The shields held, for now, but the strain was evident. Alarms screamed as red lights flashed across the bridge. "Shields at 60%! Clara shouted, her hands flying over the console. "Redirecting power from secondary systems." "Evasive maneuvers," Jack barked. Ben responded instantly, weaving the ship through the barrage with practiced skill. The Federation pilots struggled to keep up with the erratic movements, their shots missing by inches. Rachel monitored the situation from her station, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Enemy formation is tight. If we can break it apart, we'll have a chance." "How?" Jack asked, glancing at her. "There's an asteroid field nearby," she explained. "If we lure them in, they'll have to split up to avoid collisions. That'll give us the opening we need." Jack nodded. "Do it." Ben adjusted course, guiding the Iron Resolve toward the dense cluster of rocks. The Federation ships followed, their formations beginning to fray as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Explosions erupted as some of them collided with asteroids, while others veered wildly off course. "Now!" Jack commanded. Rachel activated the decoy drones they had prepared earlier. Dozens of small automated units launched from the ship, mimicking its signature and drawing fire from the remaining Federation vessels. The distraction worked perfectly, buying the crew precious seconds to regroup. Clara seized the opportunity. "Weapons online, targeting lead ship." The plasma cannons roared to life, unleashing a devastating salvo that tore through the flagship's weakened shields. Within moments, the vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. The other Federation ships faltered, their confidence shaken. "They're retreating," Ben announced, relief evident in his voice. Jack allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before turning to the crew. "Don't celebrate yet. Keep your focus. We're not done until they're completely gone." Sure enough, the Federation fleet regrouped at a safe distance, clearly unwilling to risk another direct assault. After several tense minutes, they disengaged entirely, disappearing into hyperspace. The bridge erupted in cheers as the reality of their victory sank in. Clara slumped back in her chair, exhaling deeply. "We did it," she murmured, almost unable to believe it herself. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling faintly. "Yeah, we did." News of the second victory spread quickly, reaching even farther than before. Colonies across the galaxy watched in awe as footage of the Iron Resolve's exploits circulated. Messages poured in from oppressed worlds, begging for help against corporate overlords and tyrannical regimes. Others offered resources, recruits, and intelligence, eager to support the unlikely heroes who had risen from the ashes of abandonment. For New Haven, the change was profound. The colony transformed overnight, shifting from a forgotten outpost to a beacon of hope. People who had once lived in fear now dreamed of rebellion, inspired by the courage of those aboard the Iron Resolve. Jack and Clara became symbols of resistance, their names whispered reverently in taverns and council chambers alike. Yet amidst the celebration, doubts lingered. Clara couldn't shake the guilt of leading so many into harm's way, knowing full well the cost of their victories. Jack wrestled with the weight of responsibility, wondering how long they could sustain this momentum before the galaxy turned its full wrath upon them. The victories of the Iron Resolve had ignited a spark that spread far beyond New Haven. Colonies and settlements scattered across the galaxy began to see hope where there had been none before. Messages flooded in daily, pleas for help, offers of support, and declarations of solidarity. Some sent supplies, crates of food, spare parts salvaged from old ships, or rare materials needed for repairs. Others offered their skills, traveling great distances to join the crew of the Iron Resolve. The ship's legend grew with each passing day, transforming it from a symbol of survival into a rallying cry for the oppressed. But fame carried its own dangers. With every story told about their triumphs came whispers of retaliation. Corporate interests, corrupt officials, and rival factions saw the Iron Resolve not as a beacon of hope, but as a threat to their dominance. They conspired in shadowy boardrooms and secret meetings, plotting ways to undermine the growing movement led by Jack Harper and Clara Monroe. Sabotage attempts became more frequent. Supply shipments mysteriously disappeared, communication signals were jammed, and rumors spread like wildfire, aiming to divide the fragile coalition forming around New Haven. Jack felt the pressure mounting. He spent long hours pacing the bridge of the ship, staring out at the stars while trying to anticipate the next attack. "They're watching us," he said one evening to Clara, who sat nearby reviewing schematics for upgrades. "Every move we make is being analyzed, dissected. We can't afford another mistake." Clara looked up, her expression thoughtful. "We knew this would happen," she reminded him gently. "When you stand up to bullies, they don't just walk away, they fight back. But we've faced worse odds before. Remember when we started this whole thing? Everyone thought we were crazy. Look how far we've come." Her words brought a faint smile to Jack's face, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. "I know," he admitted, "but back then it was just us. Now there are so many people counting on us. If we slip up, it's not just New Haven that pays the price. It's everyone who believes in what we're doing." Clara nodded, understanding the weight of his concerns. She too felt the burden of leadership, though she handled it differently. While Jack channeled his anxiety into action, obsessively planning and preparing for every possible scenario, Clara focused on building connections. She reached out to leaders of allied colonies, fostering trust and cooperation. She organized training sessions for new recruits, teaching them not only technical skills but also the values that had guided their mission from the start: resilience, unity, and defiance in the face of injustice. One such recruit was a young woman named Emily Dawson, who had arrived on New Haven after fleeing a corporate mining operation that treated workers like disposable tools. Emily had no formal engineering experience, but she possessed an uncanny ability to solve problems creatively. Within weeks, she had earned Clara's respect and Jack's grudging admiration by devising a clever solution to stabilize the ship's unstable power core using nothing but scrap metal and ingenuity. Emily wasn't alone. Dozens of others joined the cause, each bringing something unique to the table. There was Marcus Hale, a former soldier turned farmer, whose tactical knowledge proved invaluable during skirmishes, and Sophie Grant, a soft-spoken medic who doubled as a negotiator, helping broker alliances between wary factions. Together they formed a diverse team united by a shared purpose: to create a better future for themselves and those like them. Despite these strengths, challenges continued to mount. A covert strike team infiltrated New Haven under cover of darkness, targeting key infrastructure. Though they managed to destroy several generators and disrupt communications, the colonists fought back fiercely, driving the attackers away before significant damage could be done. Still, the incident left scars, both physical and emotional, on the community. In response, Jack proposed expanding the Iron Resolve's role beyond defense. "If we want to protect New Haven," and everyone else looking to us for help. We need to take the fight to them, he argued during a strategy meeting aboard the ship. We can't keep waiting for them to come to us. It's time to hit back. Clara hesitated, her brow furrowed. I understand your reasoning, she said carefully. But violence won't solve everything. Every battle we win might inspire others, but it also risks escalating tensions further. Before we act, we need to think about the consequences, not just for us but for the galaxy as a whole. Ben Riley chimed in, his voice gruff but earnest. She's right, Jack. Hitting back sounds satisfying, sure, but it's not always smart. What happens if we push too hard and end up drawing the Federation's full attention? We barely survived last time. Rachel Myers added her thoughts, speaking quietly, but with conviction. Maybe there's another way. Instead of attacking directly, we could focus on gathering allies. Show them that resistance isn't futile, that together we can stand against even the biggest powers. Jack listened intently, considering their perspectives. He hated the idea of playing it safe while others suffered, yet he couldn't ignore the wisdom in their words. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said, his tone firm. We'll try diplomacy first. But if they give us no choice, he let the sentence hang unfinished, leaving no doubt about his intentions. With renewed determination, the crew set to work. Clara took charge of organizing diplomatic missions, sending small teams to neighboring systems to negotiate alliances and gather intelligence. Jack accompanied some of these missions personally, using his charisma and reputation to sway skeptical leaders. Slowly but surely, the Free Systems Alliance began to take shape, a loose coalition of disenfranchised worlds bound by a common goal. Their efforts weren't without setbacks. Some colonies refused to join, fearing retribution from larger powers. Others agreed initially but later withdrew support when threats loomed closer. Yet for every failure, there were successes that bolstered morale. One particularly memorable victory came when a group of miners seized control of a corporate facility, inspired by stories of the Iron Resolve. They reached out to Jack and Clara, asking for guidance and protection. In return, they offered access to valuable resources that could help sustain the alliance. As the months passed, the Free Systems Alliance grew stronger. Communication networks were established, allowing colonies to share information and coordinate actions. Supply lines were secured, ensuring that vital resources reached those in need. Training programs taught volunteers how to defend themselves and contribute to the cause. And through it all, the Iron Resolve remained at the heart of the movement, a living testament to what could be achieved when people refused to give up. Still, the specter of conflict loomed large. Rumors circulated of a massive fleet being assembled by corporate interests, intent on crushing the rebellion before it gained unstoppable momentum. Spies reported sightings of experimental weapons being tested, designed specifically to counter the Iron Resolve's unconventional design. The crew braced themselves for what seemed inevitable, a final showdown that would determine the fate of the Alliance, and perhaps the galaxy itself. During one quiet evening aboard the ship, Clara found Jack standing alone on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. She approached silently, leaning against the railing beside him. "You're thinking about the battles ahead," she said softly, her eyes following his gaze. "Yeah," Jack replied, his voice heavy with unspoken fears. "It feels like we're standing on the edge of a cliff, Clara. One wrong step and everything we've built could come crashing down." Clara placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Then we make sure we don't take that step," she said firmly. "We've come too far to give up now. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together, as a team, as a family." Jack smiled faintly, feeling a measure of comfort in her presence. "You always know what to say, don't you? It's easy when you're talking to someone who already knows the answer," Clara teased, nudging him playfully. "Now come on, let's get back to work. We've got a galaxy to save." Together they returned to the bridge, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For all the uncertainty, one thing remained clear. The Iron Resolve and its crew had become something greater than themselves, a symbol of hope, defiance, and the enduring spirit of humanity. And as long as they stood united, no force in the galaxy could extinguish the fire they had ignited. The galaxy was changing. The Free Systems Alliance, once a fragile dream born in the shadow of the Iron Resolve, had grown into a formidable force. Colonies that had lived under the thumb of corporate overlords and tyrannical regimes now dared to raise their voices. Messages of rebellion echoed across communication channels, spreading like wildfire. The image of the Iron Resolve and a patchwork ship built from scraps and defiance had become a rallying cry for those who refused to be silenced. But power never surrenders easily. Corporate executives, Federation officials, and rival factions convened in secret, pooling resources to crush the uprising before it spiraled out of control. Whispers of a massive fleet being assembled reached Jack Harper and Clara Monroe through their network of spies. Experimental weapons were being tested. Weapons designed specifically to counter the unconventional strengths of the Iron Resolve. The crew knew what was coming. A battle unlike anything they had faced before. Jack spent his days poring over maps of nearby star systems, plotting potential strategies. He worked closely with Ben Riley, who had taken on the role of tactical advisor, running simulations and refining battle plans. Clara focused on upgrading the ship's systems, ensuring every component was as resilient as possible. Rachel Myers fine-tuned the AI, programming it to anticipate enemy movements and adapt in real time. Even Emily Dawson contributed, devising clever modifications to the ship's armor using materials scavenged from recent supply shipments. Despite their preparations, tension hung thick in the air. The crew rotated shifts around the clock, maintaining constant vigilance. New recruits trained tirelessly, learning how to operate the ship's complex systems and handle combat scenarios. Yet beneath the surface of determination, fear lingered. Everyone aboard the Iron Resolve understood the stakes. If they failed, not only would New Haven fall, but the entire alliance would crumble. One evening, as the ship orbited above the colony, Clara called a meeting in the mess hall. The room buzzed with quiet conversation until she stepped onto a makeshift platform, her presence silencing the crowd. "We all know what's coming," she began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "They're gathering forces, preparing to strike. But we've faced challenges before and we've overcome them. This time will be no different." Her words drew murmurs of agreement, though some faces remained grim. Jack joined her on the platform, his expression resolute. "Clara's right," he said, addressing the crew. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every colony that's counting on us, every person who believes in what we're fighting for. We didn't build this ship to run away when things got tough. We built it to fight back." A cheer erupted from the crowd, bolstered by the fiery speeches of Marcus Hale and Sophie Grant, who reminded everyone of the sacrifices made to reach this point. For the first time in weeks, hope seemed to outweigh fear. Days later, the enemy fleet arrived. Dozens of sleek, heavily armed ships emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the Iron Resolve with overwhelming numbers. Admiral Grant's face appeared on the comm screen, his smug grin sending chills down Jack's spine. "You've caused enough trouble, Harper," he said coldly. "Surrender now, and I might spare your people. Resist, and you'll leave me no choice but to annihilate everything you hold dear." Jack clenched his fists but kept his tone calm. "Go ahead and try, Admiral," he replied, his voice dripping with defiance. "We've beaten your kind before. We'll do it again." The transmission cut off, replaced by the deafening roar of plasma cannons. The battle began. From the start, it was chaos. The Federation fleet unleashed a relentless barrage, testing the Iron Resolve's shields to their limits. Clara monitored the energy levels, her hands flying over the console as she redistributed power to critical systems. Explosions rocked the ship, sending crew members stumbling but never faltering. Ben guided the vessel through tight maneuvers, dodging enemy fire while positioning it for counterattacks. Rachel's AI proved invaluable, predicting enemy formations and identifying weak points in their defenses. "Target the lead ship," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din. Jack relayed the order and the plasma cannons roared to life, tearing through the flagship's weakened shields. Within moments, the vessel exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. The loss rattled the Federation fleet, forcing them to regroup. But they quickly adapted, launching waves of fighters to swarm the Iron Resolve. The crew responded with precision, deploying decoy drones to confuse the attackers while focusing fire on key targets. Emily's modifications to the ship's armor held firm, deflecting blows that would have crippled lesser vessels. As the battle raged, Clara noticed something alarming. The enemy's experimental weapons were beginning to take effect. Strange pulses of energy disrupted the ship's systems, causing temporary blackouts and malfunctions. "We can't keep this up forever," she warned Jack, her voice strained. "If they keep hitting us with those pulses, we'll lose control of the ship." Jack nodded grimly. "Then we end this now," he said, making a decision. Turning to Ben, he ordered, "Take us straight into the heart of their formation. Full speed." Ben hesitated, glancing at Clara for confirmation. She met his gaze, understanding the risk but trusting Jack's judgment. "Do it," she said firmly. The engines roared as the Iron Resolve surged forward, plowing through the enemy fleet like a battering ram. Shields flared as the ship absorbed hits, but its sheer momentum carried it deep into the fray. Rachel activated a secondary weapon system, a prototype EMP cannon designed to disable enemy electronics. With a single pulse, half the Federation fleet went dark, their ships drifting helplessly in space. Admiral Grant's remaining forces scrambled to retreat, but the Iron Resolve pursued relentlessly. One by one, the enemy vessels fell victim to ambushes and sabotage, their advanced technology rendered useless against the scrappy ingenuity of the crew. By the time the last ship fled into hyperspace, the battlefield was eerily silent. Exhaustion settled over the crew as the reality of their victory sank in. Clara slumped into her chair, her hands trembling as she ran diagnostics on the damaged systems. Jack leaned against the railing, staring at the wreckage scattered across the void. "We did it," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Against all odds, we actually did it." News of the battle spread faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, oppressed colonies erupted in celebration, hailing the Iron Resolve as a symbol of triumph. Messages poured in from allies and strangers alike, pledging support and vowing to continue the fight. The Free Systems Alliance, once a fledgling coalition, had become an unstoppable movement. Yet amidst the jubilation, Jack and Clara couldn't shake the weight of responsibility. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Corporate interests and Federation loyalists still held vast resources and influence, and though the alliance had grown stronger, it remained vulnerable to betrayal and division. To address these concerns, Clara proposed expanding the alliance's infrastructure. "We need more than just ships and weapons," she explained during a council meeting aboard the ship. "We need schools, hospitals, communication networks, everything required to sustain a society. If we want this movement to last, we have to build something worth fighting for." Jack agreed, adding, "And we need leaders willing to step up, people who understand the values we're fighting for and can inspire others to join us." Under Clara's guidance, teams were dispatched to allied colonies to establish training programs, medical facilities, and supply depots. Marcus Hale took charge of organizing local militias, teaching volunteers how to defend themselves and contribute to the cause. Sophie Grant worked tirelessly to mediate disputes between factions, ensuring unity within the alliance. Meanwhile, Jack focused on fortifying the Iron Resolve, knowing it would remain the backbone of their efforts. New recruits brought fresh ideas and innovations, transforming the ship into an even more formidable weapon. Emily Dawson suggested installing modular components, allowing the crew to adapt quickly to changing threats. Rachel Myers expanded the AI's capabilities, integrating it with the Alliance's growing network of sensors and communication arrays. As months passed, the Alliance flourished. Colonies that had once been isolated and defenseless now stood together, sharing resources and knowledge. Trade routes reopened, economies stabilized, and communities rebuilt. For the first time in generations, hope replaced fear. But the cost of their victories weighed heavily on the crew. Clara often found herself lying awake at night, haunted by memories of battles fought and lives lost. Jack, too, struggled with guilt, wondering if there had been another way, a path that didn't require so much sacrifice. Yet whenever doubt crept in, they reminded themselves of why they had started this journey, to protect their home and give others a chance to live free. One evening, as the ship drifted quietly in orbit above New Haven, Clara joined Jack on the observation deck. The colony below glowed faintly in the twilight, its streets bustling with activity. "Look at that," she said softly, gesturing toward the view. "It's beautiful." Jack nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, it is. All because we refuse to give up." Clara turned to him, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "And we'll keep going, Jack, no matter what comes next. Because that's who we are, survivors." Years passed, and the legend of the Iron Resolve grew into something larger than life. Tales of its exploits were told in taverns, classrooms, and council chambers across the galaxy. To some, it was a symbol of defiance, a reminder that even the most broken pieces could be forged into something extraordinary. To others, it was a warning, proof that those who had been cast aside could rise up and challenge the mighty. Jack Harper didn't live to see the full extent of the legacy he helped create. He passed away quietly one evening, surrounded by friends and loved ones aboard the ship he had poured his soul into building. His body was old and worn, but his spirit remained unyielding until the very end. Clara Monroe held his hand as he took his final breath, her heart heavy with grief yet filled with gratitude for the man who had inspired so many. Clara stepped into a leadership role after Jack's death, guiding the Free Systems Alliance with wisdom and compassion. She understood better than anyone that their fight wasn't just about winning battles. It was about creating a future where no one had to live in fear. Under her direction, the Alliance expanded its focus beyond defense and rebellion, investing in education, healthcare, and sustainable development. Colonies once ravaged by exploitation began to heal, their people reclaiming their dignity and hope. Ben Riley retired from active duty, settling on New Haven with his family. Though he no longer flew missions, he remained a mentor to younger pilots, passing down the lessons he had learned during years of service. Rachel Myers continued to innovate, her work shaping the next generation of technology used by the Alliance. Emily Dawson became a celebrated engineer, traveling between colonies to share her knowledge and inspire others to embrace creativity and resourcefulness. Even as time moved forward, the Iron Resolve stayed at the heart of the movement it had sparked. The ship itself was retired eventually, its battered hull preserved in a museum orbiting New Haven. Visitors came from all corners of the galaxy to walk its corridors, marveling at the ingenuity and determination that had brought it to life. For many, standing inside the ship felt like stepping into history, a tangible connection to a moment when everything changed. But the story didn't end there. Decades later, a new generation of engineers unveiled a sleek, state-of-the-art warship designed to honor the legacy of the Iron Resolve. Named the Eternal Resolve, it carried forward the same spirit of innovation and defiance that had defined its predecessor. Its design was modern, its systems advanced, but its purpose remained unchanged: to protect the vulnerable and strike back against tyranny. On the day of its launch, Clara stood aboard the bridge, watching as the vessel soared into the stars. Her hair was streaked with gray, and lines marked her face, but her eyes still burned with the fire of someone who refused to give up. Around her, young crew members worked with enthusiasm, their voices echoing through the corridors. They were the descendants of rebels, dreamers, and fighters, the inheritors of a legacy born from scraps and courage. As the ship disappeared into the distance, Clara turned to Sophie Grant, now an elder stateswoman within the Alliance. "Do you think they'll be ready?" she asked softly, her gaze lingering on the horizon. Sophie smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "They have to be," she replied. "We've given them everything they need: knowledge, tools, and the belief that change is possible. The rest is up to them." Clara nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia wash over her. She thought back to the early days when the idea of building a warship seemed impossible. Back then, survival had been their only goal. Now, generations later, the galaxy was far from perfect. But it was better than it had been. People no longer saw themselves as victims. They were survivors, builders, fighters, and at the heart of it all was a scrappy little colony that had dared to dream big. That night, Clara returned to New Haven, walking through streets alive with laughter and music. Children played under the glow of lanterns, their faces lit with joy. Merchants called out to passers-by offering goods crafted with care and skill. The air buzzed with energy, a testament to the resilience of a community that refused to let despair define them. Clara paused outside a small cafe, listening to a group of musicians perform a lively tune. One of the singers caught her eye and grinned, tipping his hat in recognition. It was Marcus Hale's grandson, carrying on the tradition of storytelling through song. His voice rang out clear and strong, recounting the tale of the iron resolve and the people who had built it. As the crowd cheered, Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. She slipped away quietly, making her way to a hill overlooking the colony. From this vantage point, she could see the entire settlement spread out below, its lights twinkling like stars against the dark landscape. Beyond it lay the vast expanse of space, infinite and unknowable. Somewhere out there, the eternal resolve patrolled the borders of the Alliance, ensuring that the sacrifices of the past would not be forgotten. Clara sat down on the grass, gazing up at the sky. She thought about Jack, Ben, Rachel, Emily, all the people who had stood beside her through the darkest moments. Their faces flashed in her mind, each one a reminder of what they had achieved together. She allowed herself a rare moment of reflection, letting the weight of their journey settle over her. "We did good," she whispered to the stars, her voice barely audible. "Didn't we?" A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers. Clara closed her eyes, imagining the voices of her friends answering her question. Yes, they had done good. Not because they had won every battle or solved every problem, but because they had refused to give up. Because they had believed in themselves, in each other, and in the possibility of a brighter future. When morning came, Clara rose with renewed purpose. There was still work to be done, challenges to face, and dreams to nurture. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, knowing that the legacy of the Iron Resolve would endure long after she was gone. And so, the galaxy continued to spin, shaped by the actions of those who had dared to defy the odds. The story of the Iron Resolve became more than just a tale of rebellion. It became a beacon of hope, reminding everyone who heard it that even in the darkest times light could be found if only one had the courage to seek it.